They called him a monster. He stood alone in the auction pen, black as a storm cloud and twice as angry, his ears pinned flat, nostrils flaring, and hooves slamming into the dusty ground, as if daring anyone to come closer. His eyes, those wild, rolling eyes, told of pain, fury, and something deeper. Something broken. A battered wooden sign read, "Lot number 39. Dangerous. Do not approach." Men laughed cruelly from the fence line. "Look at that beast." One chuckled. "Wouldn't fetch $1 if he weren't pure muscle." "Muscle won't fix that temper." Another snorted. "He's not worth the rope to hang him." The boy heard it all. Ethan was 12, maybe small for his age, with sunburned cheeks and a face half hidden behind a mop of golden brown hair. He stood beside his grandfather, quietly holding onto the old man's sleeve as the bidding for a line of calm mares played out under the auctioneer's booming voice. But Ethan wasn't watching the mares. He was watching the black horse. The animal didn't fit in. Not with the docile horses being paraded through the gates, not with the calm rhythm of the auctioneer's chant, and certainly not with the dusty men who eyed him like a threat instead of a creature in pain. "Grandpa," Ethan whispered, tugging lightly. "That horse, why does he look so angry?" Grandpa Thomas squinted across the yard. His thick white mustache twitched slightly. "Because he's been hurt," the old man said. "Badly, I reckon. Takes a lot to make a horse like that turn wild." Will they sell him?" "Maybe. Or maybe they'll haul him back to the kill pen if nobody's fool enough to buy him." Ethan's heart clenched. He didn't know much about horses. Not yet. Not like his grandfather, who'd trained them for 40 years, but he knew what a kill pen meant. "Do you think he was born mean?" "No," Grandpa Thomas said. "No horses. Not one. But enough beatings, enough fear. They'll forget what it means to trust." The words stayed with Ethan. They echoed louder than the auctioneer's calls, louder than the jeers from the crowd, louder even than the thunder of hooves from horses being wrangled back into trailers. Trust. The next hour passed like a blur. Horses came and went. A mare with a gentle eye went for $800. A gelding with a limp sold for $25. Grandpa Thomas put in a bid for a bay pony that Ethan liked, but another buyer raised the price too high. And then the gate groaned open, and the black horse was forced into the ring. He came like a storm breaking free. A handler tried to lead him in, but the horse snapped the rope and reared up high, hooves slicing the air. He didn't attack, he avoided, but his fury was unmistakable. Fear coated every movement like armor. People gasped. One woman turned away, clutching her daughter. "Lot 39, the auctioneer said, his voice stiff. "Unbroken stallion. 3 years old. Sold as is." Silence. No bids. The horse trembled, lathered with sweat, sides heaving. He circled the ring like a prisoner, wild eyes scanning the crowd. Every shout, every clang of the gate, made him jolt as if struck. Ethan stepped closer to the fence. He could feel something radiating from the horse. Not just fear, not just anger. Desperation. "Stop the auction." A man barked. "That thing's a liability. Put him down before he kills someone." The words pierced the air like knives. And the horse, he stopped. He didn't rear, didn't charge. He just stood there, frozen, ears twitching as if he understood. Ethan moved without thinking. One hand reached out between the slats of the wooden fence. Slowly. No sudden movement. His fingers trembled, but not with fear. With instinct. With something deeper. The crowd muttered. Someone grabbed his shoulder. "Boy, back away from that pen." "Let him be," Grandpa Thomas said, voice low and steady. "Let the horse decide." The stallion turned. He saw the hand. Snorted, stepped sideways. Muscles tight as coiled rope. Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't say a word. Just kept his hand still, palm open. And then, miraculously, the horse stepped forward. 1 foot, then another. Every step was a gamble, like walking across thin ice. The crowd went silent. When the stallion reached the fence, Ethan gently pressed his palm against the horse's forehead. It was hot, trembling, scarred. The horse didn't move. And Ethan whispered, soft as wind, "It's okay now. You're safe." The entire pen held its breath. The stallion blinked slowly, his eyelids drooping, his ears flicking forward. He exhaled, long and low, and lowered his head as if all the fight had drained from his bones. It wasn't surrender. It was something else. A man muttered, "I'll be damned." The auctioneer cleared his throat. Bidding starts at 100. Still silence, and then a voice, cracked gravelly, determined, called out, 100. Grandpa Thomas. Gasps rippled through the yard. "You're crazy," someone hissed. "That horse'll tear your barn down." The old man didn't answer. He just stepped up beside Ethan, placed one hand on his grandson's shoulder, and looked the horse in the eye. "No one bid higher?" the auctioneer called, sweat forming on his brow. "Nothing. Sold. To the gentleman in the brown hat." The gate creaked open, but the horse didn't bolt. He stayed where he was, nose pressed gently to the boy's outstretched hand. Ethan smiled, and for the first time since that black horse had been dragged into the auction yard, someone did not see a monster. They saw hope. The handlers moved hesitantly, but the stallion followed Ethan without rope or whip, just a few steps behind him, like a shadow tethered not by force, but trust. "He's yours now," Grandpa said quietly. "No," Ethan replied, eyes still locked on the horse. "We belong to each other." From the edge of the crowd, a man in dark sunglasses scribbled something on a notepad. Another leaned toward him and muttered, "You think he's got potential?" "More than that," the man replied. "Something's changed. That horse wasn't tamed. He chose." Back in the pen, dust still swirled, but something was different now. The tension had broken. The fear had cracked open like old wood. And standing at the center of it all, a boy and a horse took their first steps, not away from pain, but toward something unknown, something worth believing in. And just outside the gates, the sun broke through the clouds. The black stallion stood in the middle of the pasture, head high, body coiled like a spring, eyes sharp with unease. He hadn't bolted, not yet, but his muscles twitched under the summer sun, and every sound, the rustle of wind, the flutter of birds, made his ears snap. Ethan watched from the fence. It had been 2 days since the auction, and the horse still hadn't let anyone near him except the boy. Not even Grandpa Thomas, who had trained hundreds of horses, tried to force it. He simply observed, arms crossed, eyes squinting under his old felt hat. "He's watching the world like it owes him pain," Grandpa said. Ethan nodded, resting his chin on the top rail. "He doesn't trust it won't." "You're not wrong," Grandpa murmured. "But if you want to help him, it's not just about feeding or touching him. It's about showing him you'll be there. Every day. Without fail." "I will," Ethan said, voice steady. He meant it. Each morning, he woke at dawn, pulled on his boots, and made his way to the pasture. He didn't bring ropes or bridles, just sat on the edge of the field, sometimes reading aloud from the same dog-eared book his mother had once read to him when she was still alive. Other times, he'd talk about nothing and everything, about how hard math class was, about the neighbor's barking dog, about missing his mom's voice. And the horse listened. He never came close again, not like at the auction, but he stopped pacing, stopped glaring. Sometimes, he even lowered his head to graze while Ethan spoke. "See that?" Grandpa said on the 4th day. "He's not looking for a way out. He's looking for a reason to stay." "What should I call him?" Ethan asked. The old man was quiet for a moment. "Names mean something, son. You don't give a name until you see who they are." So Ethan waited. That afternoon, while the sun dipped low, casting gold across the field, the horse took 5 steps toward him, then stopped. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. The horse took 2 more, and Ethan smiled. That night at dinner, Grandpa asked, "You think he's ready for the round pen yet?" Ethan hesitated. "Not yet. He still flinches at shadows." Grandpa nodded slowly. "You're learning. Training ain't just about control. It's about listening." By the end of the week, the stallion would stand just a few feet away from Ethan, close enough to smell the hay in his hands. Still wary, still tense, but different, softer. And finally, on the 8th morning, when Ethan stepped into the field with a brush in his hand and quiet patience in his eyes, The horse didn't back away. He stayed. Ethan moved slowly, inch by inch, speaking in a low, steady voice. I'm not here to hurt you. Just want to help. The horse let the brush touch his shoulder. He flinched, but didn't flee. Ethan's breath caught. That's it, he whispered. Good boy. After 10 strokes, the stallion pulled away and trotted to the far side of the field, tossing his head with restless energy. But he didn't seem angry, just uncertain. Ethan looked toward the house, where Grandpa was standing on the porch, coffee in hand. He let me touch him, Ethan called out. Grandpa raised his mug in silent approval. Next step's a halter. But don't rush. You rush a scared horse, and you lose everything you built. Ethan nodded. The next day, he didn't bring the brush. Just his hands. Open, gentle. The stallion walked to him. That afternoon, Grandpa brought out the old leather halter. It was cracked, worn smooth with use. This one was your mama's, he said. Used it on her first horse. Ethan took it with reverence, ran his fingers across the stitching. Think he'll take it? Only one way to find out. They waited until dusk, when the air was cooler and the flies had settled. The stallion stood near the barn now, no longer favoring the farthest corners of the field. Ethan held the halter low, not out toward the horse like a trap, but against his leg like an offering. He didn't push, just waited, and after what felt like an eternity, the stallion stepped forward. 1 step, 2. He sniffed the leather, then snorted softly. Ethan raised the halter. The stallion froze. For a full minute, neither moved. Then Ethan whispered, please. And the stallion lowered his head. The halter slid on. No fight, no panic, just breath. When Ethan fastened the strap, the stallion took 1 deep breath and exhaled against the boy's shoulder. Warm, heavy, almost tired. Ethan looked up, his eyes bright with awe. He trusts me. Grandpa stepped forward slowly. You earned it. The old man reached out cautiously, hand extended. The stallion's ears twitched, but he didn't pull away. Grandpa touched the horse's neck, firm, steady. Well, I'll be, he muttered. That's something I haven't seen in a long time. What should we name him? Ethan asked again, voice trembling with hope. Grandpa studied the stallion, then looked to Ethan. That's your call now. Ethan turned to the horse, thinking. The name had to mean something. It had to reflect not the fear the stallion came from, but what he was becoming. Shadow, Ethan said softly. Because he followed me, even when he didn't trust me yet. The stallion blinked. Shadow, Ethan repeated. That's who you are. The name settled over the pasture like a promise. From that day on, Shadow followed Ethan not just with his feet, but with his heart. They trained slowly, each day adding a new step, walking in circles, halter work, backing up. Grandpa stood nearby, offering advice when needed, but letting the boy lead. He listens to you, the old man said one afternoon, watching the two move in rhythm. And not just because you fed him. Ethan smiled. He listens because I listened first. As the summer sun slid toward evening and the wind rustled through the trees, Ethan led Shadow toward the barn for the first time. He didn't pull the lead rope. He didn't need to. Shadow walked beside him, head low, eyes calm. And inside the house, a phone rang. Grandpa answered. A gruff voice on the other end said, We heard about that black stallion. Word is the boy's done something no grown man could. Grandpa's brow furrowed. What's this about? We want to see him. The boy. And the horse. Who's we? The State Training Commission, the voice said. We've got a problem horse up north. Unrideable. Untouchable. But if the boy's half the horseman folks are saying, maybe he's the one we've been waiting for. Grandpa looked out the window, at the boy and the stallion walking in perfect step. And he didn't say no. Ethan didn't sleep much the night after Grandpa took that call. The thought of leaving the ranch, even just for a few days, tugged at his insides. Shadow had just begun to trust him, truly trust him. And now, they were asking him to prove it on a horse no one else could handle. He wasn't sure if that was honor or punishment. Grandpa didn't push. Over breakfast, he simply slid the folded letter across the table. Read it when you're ready. Ethan opened it anyway. It was official, sealed, signed, and formal. The State Training Commission had a Mustang gelding in a government facility upstate. Thrown from 5 riders. Kicked through fences. Refused to eat when haltered. They'd run out of trainers. And hope. But then someone from the auction had passed word along about the boy who gentled a wild stallion without rope or fear. They wanted to see if Ethan's quiet magic could work again. "He's not ready," Ethan said, eyes on Shadow grazing outside. Grandpa didn't respond at first. He took a sip of coffee and stared through the kitchen window. "Neither were you." They left 2 days later. Grandpa packed the truck, double-checked the trailer, and loaded Shadow without a fuss. Ethan sat beside the stallion during the long drive, whispering calm words over the hum of the road. The horse stood steady, but Ethan could feel the tension pulsing beneath his skin, like wires stretched too tight. They arrived at the facility as the sun was beginning to set. Stark buildings, cold fences, everything gray and flat. No trees, no birds, just wind and steel. A tall man in a windbreaker approached as they pulled in. "You're the boy." Ethan nodded, suddenly wishing he were older, taller, braver. "I'm Director Lansing," the man said. He glanced at Shadow. "That him?" "Yes, sir," Ethan said, sliding out of the truck. Lansing's eyes narrowed. "Pretty animal. But it's not him we're worried about." They walked past pens full of horses. Some grazed quietly. Others paced with haunted eyes. But only one pen had reinforced steel posts and a notice board with the word danger written in red. "He's in there," Lansing said. The Mustang was massive, bay-colored, scarred down one shoulder. He spun at the sight of them, nostrils flaring, hooves pounding the dirt. His eyes burned with a kind of fury that Ethan hadn't even seen in Shadow. "What's his name?" Ethan asked. Lansing shrugged. "We called him Brimstone, seemed to fit." Grandpa whistled low. "He's not just scared. He's fighting something." Ethan stepped closer to the fence. Brimstone lunged. Not toward him, but at the wind. "He's not angry at us," Ethan murmured. "He's angry at the world." Grandpa watched the boy, eyes narrowing. "You don't have to do this, Ethan." "I know." Ethan didn't move for a while. He just stood there, watching the Mustang storm his pen like a prison guard had wronged him. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the storm began to slow. Not stop, but lessen. Just enough for Brimstone to look at Ethan, not through him. That was the moment Ethan decided. The next morning, he set up a stool outside the pen. He didn't go in, didn't bring treats or tools. Just sat and talked. About nothing, really. About his life. About Shadow. About what it felt like to be small in a world that expected strength from you. Shadow watched from his stall, quiet, unmoving. By the 4th day, Brimstone stopped charging. He didn't relax, not fully, but he stayed still long enough to eat with Ethan near the fence. By the 6th, Ethan could toss hay into the pen, and the Mustang would take it without flinching. "It's working," Lansing said, voice laced with disbelief. "No," Grandpa corrected him, watching Ethan's face as he sat cross-legged in the dust. "He's working." The real test came on the 10th day. Ethan stood at the edge of the pen with a halter, not in his hand, at his feet, and he said nothing. Brimstone stood still. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and finally, the Mustang stepped forward, one hoof, then another, until the halter lay between them like a fragile truth neither could ignore. Ethan picked it up slowly, breath shallow. He raised it. Brimstone didn't move. And when Ethan slipped the halter over his head, the Mustang flinched, but stayed. It was the first time anyone had touched him without blood following. Lansing stood in stunned silence. How did he do that? Grandpa's eyes were misty. He earned it. That evening, Shadow and Brimstone stood in neighboring pens. Not close, but aware. Shadow's calm seemed to bleed through the air, like a song only Brimstone could hear. The big bay gelding snorted once, then lowered his head. "He's not just training horses," Lansing said quietly. "He's healing them." Ethan leaned on the rail, exhausted but content. "I think he needs a new name," he said. "Not Brimstone." Lansing looked surprised. "You think he cares?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He just watched the Mustang's breathing, slow and steady now. "His name's Valor." Grandpa raised an eyebrow. Why? Because he fought the dark, Ethan whispered. And he's still standing. No one argued. The next morning, Lansing offered Ethan a position, informal for now, working with the most troubled horses in the state program. Ethan looked at his grandpa, unsure. "We come home on weekends," Grandpa said. "But only if this is what you want." Ethan looked at Valor, then at Shadow, then at the horizon. "I want to help them." Lansing smiled. "You've got a gift, son." Ethan nodded. "It's not a gift." "Then what is it?" "It's listening. Most people just never learned how." As they loaded Shadow for the drive back to the ranch, Valor stood at the gate, watching them go. He didn't whinny, didn't pace, just stood steady, calm, present. And for the first time, Ethan believed he hadn't just helped a horse. He'd found his calling. But as they drove away, Grandpa cleared his throat. "There's something you should know." Ethan turned. "What is it?" "That wasn't the only letter," he said. "There's a man in Montana. Says he's got a horse that doesn't just run from people. It stops eating when it hears voices." Ethan swallowed hard. "And he wants me to come." Grandpa smiled. "He said he'd wait as long as it takes." Ethan stared out the window, heart racing. He didn't feel like a boy anymore. He felt like someone stepping into something bigger than he'd ever imagined. "Let's go home first," he said softly. And then, Ethan smiled, gaze on the road ahead. "Then we keep listening." The house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet it used to be. It wasn't hollow. It hummed with something new, purpose, maybe. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, absently tracing the rim of his mug, while Grandpa read the newspaper aloud. Though Ethan barely listened, his thoughts were still back at the government facility, with Valor. "Horse Whisperer gets another miracle under his belt," Grandpa muttered, flicking the page. "That's what they're calling you now." Ethan smirked. "Sounds ridiculous." "Well, it's true, isn't it?" He shrugged. "I don't whisper. I just try to listen." Grandpa folded the paper and leaned forward, more serious now. "You were always quiet, even as a kid. But now your quiet means something to others. That's not a small thing, son." The weight of those words settled on Ethan's shoulders. The letters kept coming, emails, calls, messages from desperate owners and trainers. Some wanted him to fix horses. Others wanted him to teach their methods, or at least bottle them. But one message stood out above the rest. It was handwritten, from a woman named Ruth Fletcher in Montana. Short, plain, honest. She had a mare, wild, untouched. The kind of wild that came from deep inside, not just from open plains or harsh winds. The horse didn't spook or bolt. She simply shut down. Wouldn't look at people. Wouldn't eat when watched. Wouldn't respond to kindness or cruelty. She wrote one line that kept Ethan awake more than once. Asterisk. It's like she's trying to disappear before our eyes. Asterisk. 2 weeks later, they were back on the road, Shadow in the trailer. It felt different this time. Less like a trip and more like a mission. Ethan didn't even ask Grandpa if he minded driving that far again. He just knew he would. The Montana landscape rose like something ancient. Jagged cliffs, pine-covered hills, and endless skies that seemed to stretch forever. Ruth's ranch was quiet, remote, the kind of place where sound traveled slow and people spoke even slower. She met them at the gate, middle-aged, strong-handed, weary-eyed. "I appreciate you coming," she said simply. No handshake, no ceremony, just respect, plain and quiet. "Where is she?" Ethan asked. "She stays near the north pasture. Doesn't mingle with the others." They walked in silence. Grandpa stayed behind with the truck, unloading supplies. Ethan followed Ruth along a narrow trail until they crested a small hill. There she was, a pale dun mare, standing in the shadow of a lone cottonwood. Her body was lean but not starving, her coat brushed by wind but untouched by people. Her head was high, but her eyes were elsewhere, distant, hollow, yet not broken. "She's called Mercy," Ruth said. "Not that she's ever answered to it." Ethan didn't approach. He simply sat down right where he stood, cross-legged in the grass, eyes soft, hands resting in his lap. The mare didn't move. Ruth watched him for a moment, then whispered, "Why are you sitting so far?" "Because she's already watching," Ethan replied. And she was. Mercy hadn't turned her head, but her ears had shifted, just slightly, like radar picking up the tiniest blip. For the next hour, Ethan didn't speak again. He let the land do the talking, the wind, the rustle of grass, the distant calls of birds. Only when the sun began to slip behind the hill did Ethan rise. "Tomorrow," he said gently, more to the horse than to Ruth. The next day began the same way. Ethan sat. Mercy watched. Nothing happened, and yet everything was happening. Subtle shifts. A sigh. A blink. A single muscle unclenching. By the 5th day, Ruth seemed impatient. "I know she's broken," she said over coffee. "We rescued her from a rodeo stockyard. She was bound for slaughter. I just don't want to see her suffer anymore." "She's not broken," Ethan said. "She's protecting something." Ruth tilted her head. "What?" "I don't know yet. But she hasn't given up. She's just hiding." That evening, Ethan moved closer. Not directly. Just a foot to the left. Sat again. Waited. Mercy didn't leave. On the 7th day, he spoke. "Hi." Just that. Nothing more. His voice was low, gentle. As if speaking to a ghost he didn't want to scare away. The mare shifted. For the first time, her eyes met his. It lasted only a second, but Ethan felt it like lightning in the spine. The dam had cracked. Each day after, he edged closer. She never bolted. Never touched him, either. But the distance shrank, inch by inch. A quiet negotiation between fear and hope. Shadow watched from his nearby paddock. Sometimes, Ethan swore Mercy glanced at him, as if sensing the steadiness in his old friend's bones. On the 12th day, Mercy ate from Ethan's hand. Not because she was hungry, because she chose to. Ruth cried when she saw it. "She hasn't done that for anyone," she whispered. "She doesn't trust anyone," Ethan said. "But she's starting to trust someone." The halter came a few days later. Soft, unforced. Ethan let her sniff it, touch it with her nose. No pressure, just invitation. By the end of the 2nd week, she wore it like it was part of her. "She still won't let me near," Ruth admitted. "She's not ready for everyone," Ethan said. "But she will be." And she was. A month later, Ruth placed her hand gently on Mercy's neck. The mare didn't flinch. "She's coming back to us," Ruth whispered. "You brought her back." Ethan smiled. "No, she brought herself back. I just made it quiet enough for her to hear her own voice." That night, as they packed up the trailer again, Ruth handed Ethan an envelope. Inside was another letter. "This one's from a veterans center," she said. "They've got horses used for therapy, but one in particular. He bites. Hard. They're thinking of putting him down." Ethan didn't open the letter right away. He stared at the stars. "What if I mess up?" he said. Grandpa looked up, too. "Then you try again. Same as before." Ethan nodded, his voice soft, sure. "I'll go." And in the distance, Shadow nickered once, low and steady, as if he already knew they weren't done listening yet. The wind had shifted by morning. It carried a different scent, less of dust and sweat, more of rain and distant green fields. Jack stood at the paddock fence, leaning quietly, watching the boy lead the stallion through the misty light. They moved slowly, side by side, the lead rope slack, the horse's ears relaxed. It wasn't the controlled stillness of fear anymore. It was the steady calm of trust. "You're not the same boy who came here," Jack said, not looking at him directly. "Tommy didn't stop walking." "I'm not," he replied. "And he's not the same horse." The stallion flicked an ear as if in agreement. Jack nodded slowly, gripping the fence tighter. "Funny thing, all those years I tried to force my way through life. Shouted, threatened, made everything a fight. And now I watch a quiet kid do what none of us could. Not with fists, not with fear. Just patience." Tommy turned toward him, hesitating. "You gave us a chance. Most wouldn't have." "I didn't do it for you," Jack said, voice low. "I did it for him. And maybe a little for the part of me I thought was long gone." Later that week, the truck returned. The one with government plates and cold hands. Same driver, same stiff expression. But this time, he didn't ask to load the stallion. He got out, walked up to the fence, and just watched. "I read the report," he finally said. "Didn't believe half of it." "Come see for yourself," Jack answered, stepping aside. The man approached cautiously. The stallion stood loose in the paddock, tail swaying, eyes calm. The man raised a hand, hesitantly, like someone offering peace after a long war. The stallion didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step forward, lowered his head, and breathed softly against the man's palm. No one said anything. The air was full of something too fragile to name. "We won't take him," the man finally said. "But you'll need to sign some things. Liability waivers, records, full custody." Jack looked at Tommy. Tommy nodded once. "He's not going anywhere," the boy said. Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. Parents brought their kids to see the boy and the horse. Not for a performance, not for a show, but to sit quietly and watch them move together. Gentle, calm, wordless, like prayers with hooves. Jack fixed up the old barn, turned it into something more than shelter. Tommy painted the inside, his brushstrokes clumsy but determined. He hung the photograph of the stallion's first day, wild eyes, pulled tight by ropes, beside a new one, the stallion nuzzling a child's hand, eyes closed in peace. People stopped calling him the beast. They started calling him Hope. That name stuck. One day, as summer bent toward fall, Tommy stood with Hope in the open field. The stallion was fully healed now, muscles shining, scars softened, mane thick and waving in the breeze. There was no rope, no halter, just two beings who had chosen not to leave each other. "Do you ever miss who you were before?" Tommy asked softly, his voice nearly lost in the wind. The stallion tilted his head, blinking slowly, and pressed his forehead against the boy's chest. Tommy closed his eyes. He didn't need an answer. Behind him, Jack stepped out of the barn. He held two things, an old leather saddle he'd restitched by hand, and a certificate, proof that the horse legally belonged to Tommy now. He offered both without a word. Tommy took the saddle, ran a hand across the worn leather, then looked up. "I don't want to break him," he said. "You won't," Jack replied. "You already did something harder. You healed him." Tommy mounted gently, not to ride, but to walk, slow circles under a wide sky. No commands, no reins, just balance, breath, quiet. It wasn't about training anymore. It was about trust. And the stallion carried him like a river carries a leaf, unforced, graceful, unafraid. When they reached the edge of the field, the boy dismounted. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. Hope lingered by his side, even as the sun dipped behind the hills. The final light caught in the stallion's mane like fire, and for the first time, the boy smiled not from surprise, but from knowing this was exactly where he was meant to be.